What the truck?
You are listening to What the Truck.
Are you ready to drug it, everyone? Happy Wednesday. Welcome on into What the Truck for your Wednesday. It's Wednesday, my dude.
It is Wednesday indeed. And you know what that means? We have news, we have headlines, we have guests. We have it all today.
Absolutely. We got some bacon sizzling to talk about today, Thomas.
We have videos of washing pigs with firemen. That's
See, now
right.
you gave away it.
Dang it.
You killed the lead. We got
Sorry.
bacon. We're talking whiskey. We're talking earnings. We're talking all good things here today. So let's go ahead and get started. But first, we got to say shout out to our sponsor, truckstop.com. Guys, roll the footage.
Spend less time searching and more time hauling loads with the Truck Stop Load Board. Find the right load at the right time to put more money in your pocket. Learn more today.
If you're ready to move more freight, make more money, and manage your freight business with speed and confidence, look to truckstop.com for tools that transform the way that you move freight. Learn more at truckstop.com. Did you know that they just celebrated their 30th birthday as a load board too?
Oh, wow.
1995, one of the earliest load boards, one of the earliest iterations of the internet. I saw that on social media, but it was Truckstop's account that posted it, so it's got to be real, right?
It's got to be. No one would lie on the internet now, would they?
Absolutely not. You've never, Thomas, clearly you have not spent enough time on FreightX if you think no one would lie on the internet.
Oh, speaking of which, I'm sure that we have coming up some headlines.
Yep.
And this will be some more fodder for the rabid online community to speculate. But it's earnings season, so that's going to be one of the big.
Yeah, earnings season. So we just saw one of our first big earnings releases, JB Hunt, the folks who always typically come down the pipe pretty early in the quarter for releases. JB Hunt still waiting for the market to turn, which I think everybody is. That's not a unique stance, I think, when you come out of your Q2 earnings results. Obviously, we knew Q1 was kind of abysmal for some of our larger folks, and Q2 actually had some interesting pieces for JB Hunt. And we've got some notes from Shelly Simpson here, who took to social media yesterday to release a video on what they did for earnings season and kind of how they performed.
And that brings us to our business performance. Now, demand for our intermodal service is strong as we continue to gain share and see customers converting more freight to intermodal from highway. Now, overall volume was up 6% year over year, and we completed intermodal bid season with positive pricing on our overall book of business for the first time in 2 years.
So that's good news. First time in 2 years that they've got positive pricing. And you might think this on the surface level and be like, yeah, that means the market's flipping. But really, maybe not quite the case, right? Talk to us a little bit why, Thomas.
Well, when you're thinking of a company like JB Hunt, they're very large. People think JB Hunt's trucking, huge amount of intermodal, dedicated. They have a truckload segment, a little bit of everything. But the biggest thing is being positive across the board, because for the past few quarters, we've seen fits and starts. Sometimes you get maybe a percentage or two, some single-digit wins. But the fascinating thing with especially that intermodal one, they had recently, this was reported by the Journal of Commerce, there was a $1,500 per container for surcharge for overcommitment. So let's say you made a commitment for like 50 containers. Well, turns out because they're up 6%, they're up that percentage. If you need an extra 10 more, you're going to have to pay for it. And that's something we haven't really heard about. It's almost like it's Christmas in July.
Yeah, there we go. So, I mean, our other intermodal carriers, maybe they didn't have quite a strong performance. We'll wait to see how Schneider did. Maybe they need to implement that surcharge going down into Q3, eh?
Hey, party. It ain't no party like a chassis party, because the chassis party and the rails don't stop.
There we go. All right, let's move on to our second headline for the morning. We've got cargo theft continuing to rise, and we've got insiders saying that cargo theft cases rose in Q2, and really not by a small amount. I feel like every day, again, if you're on the internet, you see people talking about cargo theft, whether that be directly out of a trailer, whether that's somebody takes an entire load, what have you. A lot of thieves continuing to target high-value goods like consumer electronics. We saw a load that was busted back in the earlier in spring of this year that was, I think, like $100 or $1 million, I think, worth of Nike shoes.
Yeah.
Consumer products continue to be a major target for that. And it's a problem that, we're all trying to address in the industry.
I mean, it's one of those things where fraudsters and thieves, we had this COVID boom. They found out there's a lot of money. People found out most trucks are only secured by either a padlock or a piece of plastic. And so it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out you can crack those puppies open, steal a pallet or two, and then, no one notices until you get to your receiver and you're like, hey, the other challenge with cargo theft is what happens when you have been thefted or when it occurs to you. And that's going to be one of the big topics because sometimes law enforcement says, ask the other guy. And then the other guy says, it's a civil matter. So in the state of Tennessee, theft over $1,000 is a felony, but I can steal over $100,000 worth of cargo. And apparently nobody stole it. The immaculate cargo theftception.
There we go. And BSI Consulting reporting that common trends for insider participation include bribing employees for information, colluding with corrupt employees at shipping and logistics companies, involvement of corrupt truck drivers, and targeting facilities near major logistics hubs. None of that should be surprising. If you got bad people in there, you're going to have bad freight outcomes. And if you're near a major logistics hub, why would you not target their trucks?
If you see the guard shack driving a Lambo or a new Rolex, you may think they may be allegedly part of an organized cargo theft ring.
Yeah, but hey, don't make assumptions. Don't make assumptions at all.
Yeah.
All right, and then let's round this up with our last headline. Speaking of continuing to combat that cargo theft threat, we've got Democrats now in Washington saying that Trump's immigration focus undermines the war on cargo theft. We saw the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act of 2025 introduced in both the House and Senate in April that would have set up a coordinated multi-agency federal response to organized cargo and retail theft. But we do see some folks who are in support of the bill saying that there is a kind of misaligned focus in Washington right now. Of course, we saw a lot of the focus over the last 6 to 8 weeks be on that English language requirement for truck drivers and fighting the accident and the safety impact of this. But cargo theft still continues to be a big boon for the industry.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because they mentioned one of those things, the Department of Homeland Security. And so I spoke with a large trucking association about what happens with cargo theft because we are hearing it being pushed on the regulatory front from folks like the ATA. And so they were like, yeah, the problem is who handles it? So they would go through Homeland Security, and Homeland Security would help get the local departments and the other agencies involved. So the reason the Democrats, from how I understand it, are angry is they're more worried that Homeland Security is going to be rounding up, either illegal immigrants, migrants, whatever it may be, and instead of using the people to target cargo theft. I mean, there's still a very systemic and fundamental issue, which is how do you handle it? Texas is a good example. Texas has what's called memorandums of understanding amongst various agencies, and they basically, when you go and you get the little deputy sticker, they figured out how to do that across the state. So that's going to be one of the continuous challenges on the regulatory front, is because everybody has an alphabet soup of agencies and everyone has their own turf. Sometimes it's hard to get everyone to agree on what happens when you steal $500,000 worth of truck, trailer, and cargo.
Yeah, there we go. We need a little bit more organization around how we're fighting this theft problem. That's our headlines for today. You can head on over to FreightWaves.com to read those and even more. And hey, while you're over there, sign up for the FreightWaves daily newsletter to get those in your inbox every single day, sometime between 11:45 and 2 o'clock, depends on the day.
It gets there when it gets there. It's like a New York deli.
There we go. It gets there when it gets there, but you're always going to have a good time. Speaking of always having a good time, JP Hampstead is here with us, our strategic research analyst, to talk to us a little bit about maybe people had a good time, but they didn't in Q2 when it comes to inflation. What's going on, JP, with the market?
So the inflation numbers came out higher than expected, up 0.3% month over month in June. The number everyone's attention to, of course, is the year over year number, which is up 2.7%. Leading the way, were things like electricity, right? Energy services, electricity was up 5.8% year over year. Groceries, the government calls food at home. They were up 2.4% year over year. Gasoline was a really interesting one, down quite a bit actually, down 8.3% year over year, up 1% month over month. That's I talked to one of our analysts who works a lot on oil and gas, and he said that it was kind of a combination. The very recent uptick and sort of stabilization in the prices due to like the Israel, Iran, Red Sea ongoing kerfluffle there. But bigger than that, more refining capacity has come online in the U.S., increasing the supply of available gasoline, but demand is also down a little bit. There have been posts on X.com from Gas Buddy and people who sort of monitor fuel station consumption, and they said that over the July 4th weekend, which is typically like a bellwether and a high point for gasoline consumption in the U.S., Total consumption probably less than it was last year. So a combination of increased supply, lower demand, conspiring to kind of dramatically lower gasoline prices in some cases. Apparel down 0.5% year over year. Shelter or rent, mortgages, things like that, up 3.8% year over year.
It's interesting to see these numbers come in, particularly the oil, gas, and gasoline numbers, because you mentioned the kerfluffle in the Middle East, if we want to call it that. There was a little bit of a panic, I think, that was going on when we first saw Iran's nuclear facilities targeted, and we were worried, okay, is this going to be the real big catalyst that sets off a massive conflict in the Middle East? And there was this kind of huge, gigantic price jump for about 24 hours, maybe even less than that. And then all of a sudden, you saw everything kind of normalize. The situation in the Middle East hasn't necessarily gotten less tense. We're still seeing a ton of attacks across the waterways there, particularly, and on oil tankers and vessels, particularly as well. So, talk to me a little bit about why we're seeing maybe this overall stabilization in the oil and gas markets.
Yeah, the Iran thing. The big fear was that they would try to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which is a critical choke point for sort of the maritime transportation of crude oil. But the reason why that was never going to be a big deal for American consumers is that, first of all, about 20% of the global oil supply moves through the Strait of Hormuz, but almost all of it goes to China. So that's not really where the U.S. gets its oil. And while it may cause volatility in international benchmarks like Brent crude, a lot of the gasoline that people buy in America is from West Texas Intermediate, which is drilled in the U.S. It's refined in on the Gulf Coast, and it isn't truly affected by that conflict. So that's kind of one reason why it's stabilizing. Another one, demand is down. The inflation that we're talking about, makes people take fewer trips, drive not as far. Usually when the economy is ripping, gasoline consumption in the U.S. surges during July. It didn't really do that.
I wanted to get your thoughts as well. So we have a chart here from the Labor Department, courtesy of the fine folks at Wall Street Journal. Things that have risen and things that have declined. I'm going to go with the Thomas Watson's Burger Index. When you buy your burger, beef and veal are up over 10%. The tomatoes and lettuce down nearly 5%. And if you can't afford either, whiskey at home at 3.5%. JP, anything stand out on this chart here for listeners? Shows certain things that have risen and certain things that have declined based on year-over-year comps.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little surprised that the consumer electronics, which we typically associate with imported Asian goods, are down so much. Because of tariffs and the random sort of volatility in supply chains around that. I would have expected some inflation there maybe, but perhaps there was a lot of pull forward, and now that the trade war has turned out to not be as intense and damaging as people thought. Maybe there's excess inventory that they're offloading and things like that. Maybe that's one reason why. Natural gas service is also interesting as being. I guess this is if you get natural gas piped into your house, you've seen costs go up quite a bit. And those, natural gas, the price of natural gas is really, really low for a really long time. And part of the reason for that is because the mixture of gas and oil in the Permian Basin that we exploit through fracking is very gassy. It's very bubbly. There's a large amount of natural gas that comes with that oil. And so for a long time, several years ago, it wasn't even worth it to capture all of the natural gas and pipe it in. And they were just flaring it and burning it off everywhere until prices came back up. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know exactly what's behind the rise in the price of natural gas, but I know that it was extremely low for a very long time just because of the sort of the excess that would be generated from regular oil production.
So also on this list, I think something that to note is that what we're seeing some of the growers, the risers over year, are those kind of non-substantial expenditures, right? On the non-physical goods, hospital services, daycare and preschool, things like that, natural gas service itself. Those are the type of things that are those non-tangible goods for consumers, which is interesting because a lot of of, I think, the inflation policy that the inflationary measures that we were going to be seeing put in place were going to be on those consumer goods, right? So where does that discrepancy sit? Why are we seeing our goods that aren't tangible consumer goods rise, or are there prices that are being paid for non-tangible goods rise, but maybe not as much in some of those tangible items?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I don't know why preschool and like daycare services would continue to get more expensive unless you think that, many daycares, for example, like, feed kids. Obviously, there's some daycares where you pack the kids' lunch, some daycares where they feed them. Costs like that have to be baked in. I would imagine like labor costs, immigration crackdowns, things like that would also affect daycare's ability to find people to take care of children. But that's a really good question. It's interesting. The other very interesting part of the CPI that we should be keeping our eyes on, that I think will affect consumers a lot too, that we didn't mention before, is that used car prices have continued to fall. They've been sort of steadily coming down. If you look here on used cars and trucks on that chart, you see they've been coming down since March, negative 0.7%, negative 0.5%, negative 0.5%, negative 0.7%. They're still up 2.8% year over year, but it seems like used car prices may have peaked and are coming back in. So that'll be something for us to keep our eyes on for the rest of the year. I know it's been difficult. We've seen massive price increases in that market, not to mention just like the unavailability of a lot of the most desirable models. And so that'll be, a good relief for consumers, hopefully later on.
Final thoughts while we have you here. On the manufacturing side, for the trucking space, one of the big things is like how much stuff is being made. So is there anything like PMI, any kind of indexes, industrials? Is there anything you're hearing across the wire in terms of truckload demand? Because it does seem like we're still in this lingering oversupply of trucking capacity.
Yeah, so industrial production numbers came out. They for June, it was up 0.3% month over month, exceeding expectations of 0.1%. Industrial production in the U.S. Is kind of slow and steady. Technically, it's a record number. It hasn't grown all that much, honestly, since 2009, like basically since the pre-pandemic. It's like I think like the pre-pandemic benchmark is like 100. And we're at like 104 right now. So it's growing. I mean, it's grown like 4% in 5 years. It's not fast at all. Capacity utilization is slightly up. The manufacturing component of industrial production was up 0.8% year over year. Most of the action seems to be happening in like utilities and things like that, which, aren't like, one could say maybe it's caused by like artificial intelligence, like data centers. Maybe it's being driven by like prices and the increased cost of natural gas and things like that. But there does seem to be more activity in the utility sector. But I mean, nothing really to write home about in industrial production. It's slow, steady growth.
Anything about industrial production about that chart that makes you trepidatious, that makes you maybe not as excited?
No, I mean, I think that when you dig into the data, and one of the ways that the government breaks down industrial production data is by looking at sort of, like raw inputs and materials, like components, and then like finished goods. And we're seeing a lot of growth right now in sort of like raw materials, in creating those materials, whether it's like, I think mining was down slightly, but there are other sort of natural resource extractions that are baked into that data set. I think it's good that growth is kind of being driven from the beginning of the supply chain in the U.S. But no, I don't see necessarily like causes for alarm.
All right, and JP, before we let you go, you got a chart about outbound tender rejection index. We can't get away without talking about this. Talk to me a little bit about that, because it looks like we were excited coming into July, and then maybe not so much.
Well, yeah, I mean, so July, like the July 4th weekend is always like a local maxima for the truckload market. July itself is something of a summer doldrum. in a waiting period before the build up to like back to school and things like that. Right now on this chart, what you see in white is the outbound tender rejection index, which is the percentage of truckloads being rejected by carriers. That's come down a little bit to, I think, 6.49%. Still healthy. I would just note that the peak, the subsequent peaks in like March, June, May, and then July, all kind of each higher than the last one is good and a sign of like increasing sensitivity in the truckload market. And then in green, we have the NTI, which is the National Truckload Index. It's our national average truckload spot rate inclusive of fuel. And that's, as you can see, it follows the tender rejections very closely. We also keep seeing higher highs and higher lows. If you're looking at the chart from kind of a quant perspective, back at 235 a mile, not a like a super exciting number, nothing like the pandemic highs. But I think like you look at this chart, especially kind of coming out of Q1, it's looking healthier and healthier to my eyes.
And nothing will ever get as exciting as the pandemic, I'm afraid.
Well, yeah.
If it does, we got some other bigger situations.
Yeah, I was about to say, be careful what you wish for.
Awesome.
The monkey's paw curls.
Yeah. JP, thanks for joining us. For people who want to catch a little bit more of your content, you've got Bring It Home that rocks every 2 weeks here on FreightWaves TV. What's up with your next episode?
Yeah, Bring It Home's a really fun show. It's all about American reindustrialization, reshoring, and the manufacturing renaissance. Just had a couple weeks ago a great show with Charles Yang talking about financing for minerals processing in the U.S. and how China has kind of hollowed that out here and how we might be able to rebuild it. Next episode's coming out tomorrow with good buddy Zane Hingsberger. He's from Windsor, Ontario, which is right across the river from Detroit. He got out of tech, bought a steel manufacturing company, has been building like steel racks for the automotive industry for the past couple of years, trying to modernize his factory with software. So that episode's coming out tomorrow. So check it out.
Awesome. Give it a watch or a listen. The Bring It Home YouTube channel, the FreightWaves YouTube channel, or our podcast players of your choice. JP Hampstead, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thomas, let's talk a little meanwhile because we got some bacon sizzling here. This is what happens when you leave your load outside for too long in the summer. You get some hot pigs, and you got some little piglets here, and you can see their little tiny faces coming out of the hole in the trailer, being sprayed down by the local fire department. That's from Rob Carpenter, one of our good buddies here at FreightWaves. What's the cutest thing that you've ever seen hauled in a livestock trailer, Thomas?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Baby piglets. That's kind of a top one. Normally in Tennessee we get chickens, and the chickens aren't too enthused to be inside the livestock trailers. So it's kind of like, oh man, what else can you fit inside? I like the horse trailers where sometimes they have customized horse trailers. They'll be like Old Billy, and you can tell the Old Billy's been around for like 20 years and he has this gilded out trailer. Those are fun.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thanks to Rob for sharing that on social media. And then, Thomas, when you get tired of delivering your packages, when you get tired of being out on the road, when you get tired of being in your UPS van, sometimes you just got to take a break. Look at this one. And I mean, I can't blame him. He's got the beautiful view of the ocean. You've got that nice ASMR of the freight train running behind you. Sometimes, you just need to take a break. But I'm watching you, Mr. UPS man, and the delivery update for your package is currently taking an ocean vacation is not an option.
He was contemplating the CPI data.
Yeah.
That's, he realized that whiskey at home was down 3.5%, but his veal and beef was up 10, and the lettuce and tomato, which cost less, fell 4.5.
You know what? There was nothing about pork on that CPI list.
Yeah.
So the piglets are safe, everyone. The piglets are safe. All right. Speaking of staying safe, let's go ahead and bring in our next guest. We've got Brandon Wiseman here from Truck Safe talking all about CVSA Safety Week. Brandon, thank you for joining us. It's the middle of the week, so we've seen now 2 full days of initiatives to keep our roads safer. Tell us a little bit about what's going on for Safe Driver Week this year.
Yeah, I haven't seen the data yet. Obviously, still in the middle of it, so we won't see the data for a while. But, these things are always interesting to see on the back end to see how things shook out with whatever area they were focusing on this particular, blitz. So we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things going on from a regulatory perspective that are popping up roadside, including things like English language proficiency and med card changes and stuff like that. So we can get into that.
Yeah, so let's start with that ELP because I think that that's been everybody's big watch, right? Is obviously the enforced regulations. The decision for that came down towards the middle of June. We got the White House support towards the end of last month, and now everybody's like, oh, is this actually having an effect? We don't know because the data is still so fresh. Anecdotally, are you seeing anything that can make you say, hey, yeah, this is actually having an impact, a decent sized impact on capacity so far?
Yeah, it's hard to tell on volume at this point because, like you said, the data lags by a few weeks. But yeah, anecdotally, I have seen several roadside inspection reports given to us by our motor carrier clients where their drivers have been placed out of service for not being able to read or speak English proficiently according to the officer who stopped them. So yes, that is happening across the country, and it is leaving a lot of questions open, like how do you get those drivers back in service once they've been placed out of service? So we're still trying to wrestle with all of those issues, but yeah, definitely happening.
I'm kind of curious about that. So let's say I don't pass, I'm out of service. Someone has to either tow my truck or another driver picks it up. Does that mean do I get to like go back in service or do I gotta how do I
How do-
restart it? Because
Yeah.
with I know out of service, if you have a tail light, get it fixed. If you have a tire, get it replaced. What's the out of service criteria for English?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question that nobody knows the answer to, unfortunately. Yeah, and the problem there you highlighted is that unlike those other types of violations that are very objective, if I have a flat tire, I fix the tire and I can get back in service. English language proficiency is very subjective. And so what one officer thinks is not proficient, the next officer down the road may think is proficient. And so the question is, what do we have to do to prove as the motor carrier that's employing this driver that we've done something to satisfy that first officer? And FMCSA hasn't weighed in on it. CVSA, to my knowledge, hasn't weighed in on it. But for what it's worth, my advice to all of my clients is you got to do something. And I think that something that you have to do has to have some substance to it. And so, in my view, it would have to include some type of English language training given to that driver, like some real training, not just like a 30-minute course or something like that. You're not going to teach a driver to be proficient in English in a short amount of time, that's for sure. So putting them through a substantive English language training course, I think, is the remedy, and having some type of certificate of completion for them available, I think, is what you need.
So obviously, a lot of kind of bottom up pressure led to this enforced ELP standard, and the fact that we had so many folks about the industry making a really loud cry for it. But you made a really good point that so far the FMCSA, CVSA really hasn't done anything to say, hey, this is how you actually get out of the sticky situation that you found yourself in. Do we need to now see that same bottom up pressure from these folks to say, all right, you gave us the regulations, or you gave us the rule makings that say, hey, this is how you get out, but now we actually need something actionable?
Well, we definitely need something like that, but I don't think you're going to see it from the same folks that were clamoring for enhanced enforcement of this rule to begin with. I think it's going to have to actually come from the top down. I think FMCSA is going to have to recognize, likely from, hearing from motor carriers who are finding themselves in this situation with stranded freight all over the U.S., and no guidance whatsoever on how to get these drivers back in service. They're going to be quickly, I think, trying to get the ear of the FMCSA for guidance on what it takes to get them back in service.
And one of the other things, speaking about the regulatory front, is the changes to the FMCSA's med certification program. I got to see this firsthand anecdotally from carriers where some of the states were not connected to the system right, and you couldn't get your DOT med cert uploaded. And we've recently seen that there is a waiver effective through October 12th of 2025. They have temporarily granted a waiver. Talk us through this for folks who may not be unaware. It used to be you had to have a paper. Everything was done by paper. I guess they tried to digitize it. What happened? Where are we at? And what should we be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, kind of a disaster at this point, unfortunately. But, many of us saw it coming from a mile away. But yeah, I mean, you're right. So this is a plan that's been in place, in motion for the past decade, literally, where the FMCSA wanted to digitize the process of getting a CDL driver's medical certifications transmitted to their state licensing agency and associated with their motor vehicle record. And, that process, that electronic process, depends on the cooperation of state licensing agencies, so 50 different state licensing agencies, and also the cooperation of the medical examiners, the doctors and others who perform these medical examinations. And getting all three of those parties together and getting their IT systems to talk nicely with one another is just apparently not that easy. Or if it is easy, there are several who weren't ready for this, even despite having a decade to be ready for it. So what that means is that the FMCSA has had to issue this waiver recently within the last week, where they are going to allow motor carriers and their CDL drivers to revert back to the old process, which is to continue relying on the paper med cards for a short period of time as proof of their physical qualifications. But that allowance is only for a period of 15 days after the driver was issued that med card. So for 15 days, they can rely on that paper med card. But after 15 days have expired, then they got to have the carrier that employs them has to have the motor vehicle record showing that that med cert has been associated with their license or with their motor vehicle record. So that's kind of where we stand now.
The on again, off again nature of some of these DOT and FMCSA regulations has been something that has plagued the industry, right, for quite literally decades. And the same thing can be said with the MC number pullback that was expected to happen again as well. Is that does the timing wise, does that coincide with now this new MedCert classification? And does that have any other bearing? Could it throw in some extra loopholes for people to jump through towards the end of October?
Yeah, so you're right. FMCSA is working towards a revitalization of their registration system that would eventually see doing away with MC numbers and a move towards US DOT numbers being the only identifying numbers associated with motor carriers and brokers and freight forwarders. And I don't know that I've seen what the status of that is. I think the plan was to originally roll that out later this year in 2025, but I know that has been pushed back several times. And as far as I know, it definitely hasn't happened yet. I don't know that they have a date certain on when that's going to take effect, but that's kind of wrapped up in the whole fraud activity that we have rampant in the industry with, nefarious actors getting access to MC numbers that shouldn't have access to those MC numbers, and booking freight and not having the safety controls in place to prevent accidents and stuff like that. So that's part of a broader initiative that the FMCSA is working on to cut down on fraud. And they are continuing to work on that. And hopefully we start to see that stuff start to take effect. I mean, one good thing that's happening now, as I understand it today, in fact, is that the U.S. Senate is holding the confirmation hearing for Derek Bars, who Trump nominated as the next FMCSA administrator. So assuming that goes well and he gets confirmed, then hopefully we have some stability there at the top of the agency and we start to get some of these initiatives pushed across the finish line.
And wanted to get your thoughts as well. One of the things I know the folks at Scopolitas told me, I had a conversation, well, if you've been nominated or appointed, and if you've been passed through the Senate, if we're looking at what does the FMCSA do post confirmation? Thank you. Post confirmation. I'm tripping out. The coffee prices are killing me right now. But when we're thinking about that, prefacing that with speed limiter stuff rolled back, what's going to be on kind of the to-do list? Because it seems like if I just get this job, I made it through the Senate, I'm totally in it. What do you think they're going to focus on first? Or is there any breadcrumbs and things that you're looking at that maybe we should be paying attention to in the coming months?
Yeah, we have a hint because Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy announced several what he calls pro-trucker initiatives that the USDOT and the FMCSA by extension plan to roll out over the indefinite future here. Things like some of the ones you've already mentioned, which is moving away from that much derided speed limiter mandate that many were up in arms about. Also, additional funding, federal funding for truck parking. I think he announced around $280 million of federal funding earmarked for truck parking specifically. So I suspect they will be working on that. We also heard that they are working on some cuts to the existing regulations. There are, I think, 18 proposals that they announced a few weeks back of some rollbacks on regulations. They weren't, in my view, they weren't anything all that significant, some minor things here and there. But then also some standing up a couple of new pilot programs, regulatory pilot programs in the hours of service area. Namely some changes to the split sleeper berth exception, and also a potential pause in the 14-hour clock for drivers who get detained at shippers or receivers facilities for long periods of time. So those are a couple of pilot programs that will be bubbling up and available for folks that want to participate. I assume they will have to apply for it, and there will be a cutoff on the number of participants that can take part in that. But those are some of the things that I expect to happen in the near term, along with the big things that we've been waiting for many years, things like the much anticipated changes to the safety measurement system, CSA scores, and how the scores are calculated. We've been waiting on that for a couple of years, and also potential changes to carrier safety ratings. So those are the things that I would expect to see over the coming months.
Talk a little bit about those changes to CSA scores, maybe going a little bit deeper about what some of those proposed changes are. We know when we're talking about the industry's attempt to combat fraud and make sure that these tragic accidents, these nuclear verdicts aren't happening, we've seen a ton of private carrier vetting systems pop up. We had Dale Prax from Freight Validate on last week to kind of talk about all of that. And, his is, are you good or are you bad? Did you break the law or did you not break the law? But it invites this really interesting conversation about the public, meaning the government, need to really clarify some of these expectations, and the private sector's response to create these tools that end up giving you sometimes even more or less information than you started with if you're talking about safety scores. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, FMCSA will tell you that SMS was never intended and should not be used as a vetting platform. It is a system used by law enforcement, namely FMCSA, to prioritize motor carriers for enforcement. That's what this system is designed to do, to help the agency that is understaffed get control of the nearly 800,000 motor carriers that they are charged with regulating, and figure out which ones they need to focus their attention on when it comes to doing things like compliance reviews and stuff like that. Which ones of these do they need to focus their attention on? That's what the system is designed for. And so, in fact, if you pull up the SMS, if you're a broker or a shipper and you look up if you type in the motor carrier's DOT number in the SMS system, you will get a pop-up that says, hey, this system's not designed for vetting. And as we all know, a lot of those scores are not even publicly available anymore. They were when the system was originally rolled out, but largely because of this reason, folks thinking that it is a vetting system, they were pulled from public view. And that's not changing. As far as I know, it wasn't in the proposed changes that they were going to make these public or anything like that. But what is changing, to your question, several different changes to the way that the scores are calculated. So right now we've got 7 categories. They're called the basics, in which motor carriers are scored relative to their peers. And we're going to make some changes to those. We're going to get rid of the existing drug and alcohol category as a standalone basic, and we're going to add those violations into the unsafe driving basic. And then we're going to split off the existing vehicle maintenance category into 2 subcategories, a vehicle maintenance and then a so-called vehicle maintenance driver observed category, just hoping to, vehicle maintenance, there are obviously a lot of vehicle maintenance violations that end up in that system, and the agency is trying to implement changes that will help it make it easier for motor carriers to try and get to the root cause of what's causing their maintenance problems. And so by breaking it out into subcategories, they're hopeful that it will be easier for motor carriers to get a handle on what are the issues if I have a high maintenance score, for example. So I would say there are probably 5 to 7 of those changes that are fairly substantial, that are supposed to be rolling out in the coming months. We don't have a date on that yet, unfortunately, but that's on the docket.
And did you hear anything about the broker transparency? That was another big hot topic issue. Some large carriers have their own brokerages as well. Was that something that, given all the other brouhaha going around, will that see a return, kind of like a prequel or a sequel or a Marvel movie? Or do you think that, given the existing challenges and the near insurmountable task of figuring out what the heck is actually going on, we may not see it for a little while longer?
Just kind of reading the tea leaves here, I don't frankly see FMCSA tackling this issue. I think they will continue to do what they are doing, which is to, give a little, act like they're going to do something about it, essentially. Maybe throw a bone to the carriers that want that type of thing. But I don't see them pursuing it for the reason I already mentioned, which is that we've got an agency that is severely understaffed. They have trouble effectuating their primary mission, which is safety on the roadways. They certainly don't have the time or the capacity or the manpower to be able to tackle non-safety related issues, which is broker transparency. Those are more commercial issues. And just my opinion, those are issues that deregulation took care of, and that we were clear through Congress's directives in deregulation in the 80s and 90s that Congress and its agencies that are set up to regulate motor carriers are getting out of the business of regulating the commercial aspects of trucking. We are only interested in regulating the safety aspects of trucking. So in my view, that's where it's going to end up.
So while we've got our prognosticator hats on the last couple minutes while we're here, let's bring it all back around to CVSA Safety Week. We've got about 2 minutes left. Talk to me a little bit about what you expect to see in some of the data. What are those things, maybe if it's types of violations, the most often seen violation, what do you think is going to be the biggest issue right now?
I don't think it's going to be any different than what we've seen in years past. I think it's going to be the common suspects. It's going to be brakes, lights, and tires on the vehicle side of things, and then on the driver side of things, it's going to be licensing issues, drivers not having the right licenses or endorsements, and also hours of service problems. That's just me guessing, but those are always the common suspects that we can never seem to get a handle on in the industry. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if we continue to see those popping up.
Your common culprits are common culprits for a reason. Who would have ever
guessed? Yeah.
All right, Brandon, for people who want to learn a little bit more, maybe make sure that they have the education component so that they don't have to deal with your out-of-service violations when it comes to CVSA Safe Driver Week. Where can people go? Where can people find a little bit more about Truck Safe Consultants? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Trucksafe.com is where we have all of our stuff, whatever we've got going on. We push out a lot of content on our YouTube channel, a lot of free videos for anybody interested on all kinds of DOT compliance topics. So yeah, social media, trucksafe.com. That's where you'll find us.
Perfect. Brandon, thank you so much for hopping on the show. We'll definitely be catching up with you again soon.
Thanks, guys.
And so, Thomas, we've featured a lot of people here in the last kind of week or so that have these resources available for you. So if you're a driver, if you're somebody who, could possibly be put out of service by a regulation or things like that, you almost have no excuse.
Yeah, there's a myriad of them. Even seatbelts. Buckle up, drivers. I've managed many fleets, and shockingly,
the information is out there, people.
It is there.
You got to read it.
To take it. You just got to take it. Speaking of things that you need to be paying attention to, we have some other housekeeping to do, and one of these involves the upcoming awards season. It's not the Oscars, but it's the Freight Oscars, the Froscars. Tell us what we got.
The Froscars. I'm going to steal that. I'm going to steal that this year. Monday, we launched our nominations for our Freight Tech 100 awards for the 2026 year. It's is it Madden? Is it college football? I don't know. Whatever it is where you release it 1 year in advance. Our 2026 Freight Tech nominations are open. Freight Tech 100 is receiving nominations right now. You can go to freightwaves.com/awards. Go ahead and nominate your favorite company. And yes, you can in fact nominate yourself. Does not guarantee that you will win no matter how many times you choose to nominate yourself, but go ahead and nominate your company, your mom's company, your favorite company, your dog's company, your shell company that you use to hide offshore funds.
Yeah.
Maybe don't do that one, actually. That's illegal activity.
Talk to your lawyers. Talk to your illegal lawyer.
Yeah, this is not legal advice. But anyways, go to freightwaves.com/awards and submit your nominations for the Freight Tech 100. Freight Tech 25, our big winners, will be announced at the Future Freight Festival right here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, about 3 weeks earlier than normal, October 21st and 22nd this year. We got some big things up our sleeves, so make sure you go and get ready for that. Thomas, also want to talk about Enterprise Fleet Summit because we're just about a week away from that. It's your bread and butter.
It is. Go to live.freightwaves.com, sign up for it. We give out gifts, we give out interviews, sometimes coolers. You don't know what it's going to be, so you got to sign up to find out, and you'll get to hear it from me as well. I'll be there. Don't meet your heroes, meet your internet heroes.
There you go. That's it for What the Truck here today. Thank you guys for sticking with us. You can find us replaying on Sirius XM channel 146, Road Dog Radio from 5 to 7. We'll be back on Friday with our final episode of the week. Take care. Don't be a stranger. We'll see you guys Friday.